This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast. I'm Marianne Matzo.
And I am, still Charlie Navarrete.
Thank God. Please get your favorite beverage, something sweet to eat, and relax while spending the next hour with us as Charlie talks about the custom of sin eating. In the second half, I'm going to talk about recurrent breast cancer. And in our third half, Charlie's going to do a reading for us from Thornton Wilder's Our Town. So, Charlie, there's this custom about sin eating,
right?
Where it's this person who ritually consumes the sins of the dead person. So we thought that here at Everyone Dies, the entire corporate structure thought that you, as our chief sin eater correspondent, would be a perfect person to tell us about this custom.
Yeah, I always get the fun jobs. So, much like the living, the dead have their own problems. But I bet they don't have to worry about parking.
Or what to wear.
Or what not to wear, depending on what the evening entails. If you subscribe to the philosophy of many paranormal hobbyists, this is a hobby? You might believe that the dead are trapped between two worlds, caught in vortices, forced to haunt a location or are bound to the earthly realm by unfinished business.
Dum, dum, dum.
Sound effects have just gotten better. No matter how you look at it, being dead is plagued by a myriad of complications. But I'm still sure it doesn't include looking for parking. Perhaps this is the reason for the existence of countless customs surrounding death and burial in both the ancient and modern world. No practice is designed to take the burden off the recently deceased, quite like the legend of the sin eater. Since at least the early 1600s and all the way to the earliest years of the 20th century, sin eaters and sin eating, a rather macabre profession that arose from folklore legends and peculiar supernatural beliefs, was a common line of work across the rural areas of the British Isles. Yeah, we wouldn't put up with rural work like that here. No.
Oh, no, we'd go to work at McDonald's.
Yes, thank you very much.
Eat my sin with some special sauce on it.
That's that Big Mac special sauce. I'm not quite sure it is, and I'm sure it's very healthy for people. But there is.
Oh yeah.
There is something very tangy in it. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So upon the death of a person of prestige, the sin eater would make an appearance outside the home of the recent dead. As the body or a casket was carried out of the home, the procession would stop to pay homage. Is it homage or homage? Some people say homage, don't they?
I think, don't some people say homage? Or is that just like the French way? Or?
Homage. Well, you say potatoes. I say
and I say potato.
The old songs. So, as they'd stop to pay homage to the sin eater. Members of the departed's family would pass bread, a wooden bowl of deer, or beer. It was a big bowl if it had a deer.
Why is it in a bowl?
It was the 1600s, and I guess that was the easiest vessel.
And how much is 6 pence worth?
One more than 5.
Okay.
So
in $20, how much is 6 pence?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask that question.
Anyway.
Okay. We'll have an answer. We'll have
one day.
We'll have the chief.
One day out of the blue, we'll tell you the answer when you're least expecting it.
We'll have the chief accountant look into that matter. So the departed's family would pass bread, a wooden bowl of beer.
As opposed to passing gas.
I was just going to say that. I thought no, we are.
We're classier than that.
We're a high class.
No, we're not.
We're a high class establishment. This is a high class joint. Yeah, that's what we are. High class. So pass. I almost said gas. Okay. So the departed's family would pass bread, a wooden bowl of beer, and sixpence over the corpse and into the hands of the waiting sin eater. The sin eater would physically take the food and spiritually impart upon himself the sins of the dead person. Well, we all need a job. The sin eater was said to speak an incantation over the body before consuming the offering. Once the ritual was completed, there was no more need for the family to worry about any evil committed by the recently deceased. Marianne, I have a bridge I'd like to offer the audience in Brooklyn.
Why couldn't they just call the priest and get the last rites and be forgiven of their sins without all this, bread and sixpence stuff?
Marianne, because there were no phones for them to call on. That's why. I would think that's pretty self-obvious. That's pretty self-evident. All right.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
Yes. So, yeah, we don't want to miss this part. So, once again, the sin eater was said, speaking an incantation, yada, yada, yada. Once
he goes to see the soup Nazi, and he says, "No more soup for you.
No soup for you. No soup for you." So once the ritual was completed, soup Nazi or otherwise, there was no more need for the family to worry about any evil committed by the recently deceased. The sin eater would then slip away, growing more detestable with every set of sins devoured. Grieving family members of the recently deceased would pay the village sin eaters to rid their departed loved ones from all the sins they had accumulated during their lives. And the sin eaters would then perform an eerie ritual that supposedly allowed the dead to enter heaven. Many people believe that a piece of bread or pastry, which was...
Ooh, did you say pastry?
Yes, I did.
Now you have my attention again.
Okay. Oh, so you weren't paying attention before?
Well...
Because there's going to be a spot quiz afterwards. So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
Very good. So a piece of bread, or Marianne's favorite, a pastry, which was placed on the chest or the face of the dead person. This bread or pastry was able to absorb all of the deceased's sins. Family members gathered around the corpse to drink ale and mourn, and a sin eater would literally eat the sins of the deceased by consuming these funerary snacks. Mm-mm.
I usually like salty snacks.
I was just thinking Andy Griffith. Remember the old commercials? It's good when he used to sell Ritz crackers. Ritz crackers. Good. There we are. Good old Andy.
Mm-hmm.
So while eating, and not Andy, but the sin eater. While eating, the sin eater would recite a special prayer. I give easement and rest now to thee, dear man. Come not down the lanes or in our meadows, and for thy peace I pawn my own soul. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, and an amen to this guy if he didn't have a pawn ticket. I mean, how's he going to get the soul back? So it's
lost for all of eternity.
That's right. I mean, these guys are serious about
that's the risk you take. You got to be careful about who somebody gives you a piece of bread.
Yes.
You don't know where it's been.
Exactly. So
exactly.
You need to be careful with. Yeah, better not go there. So just about eating and being careful. Oh, so this may seem frightening, but in the opinion of many contemporary anthropological and ethnological studies, their origins lie in the beginnings of Christianity.
I knew it.
Jesus Christ, who, according to the Bible, willingly sacrificed his life to cleanse humanity of all their sins, served as the role model to the original sin eaters, who offered their souls to purify the souls of the departed. Although sin eaters were seen as those who not only enabled the souls of the dead to safely ascend to heaven, but also as those who prevented the sin-plagued dead from returning to earth in a spectral form as ghosts or wraiths. They were usually shunted from their communities and forced to live in isolation.
Well, that's sad.
That is sad. People feared those who were willing to pawn their soul. Here we got to pawns again. Pawning thing. All right. People feared those who were willing to pawn their soul to take over the sins of the dead and add them to their own collection of sins. Such an act, although respected, was considered as the work of dark magic, witchcraft, supernatural forces, or even the devil himself. To look a sin eater in the eye, even for a mere second, was seen as a sign of bad luck.
Don't look them in the eye, Charles.
So maybe they wore sunglasses, just to look cool, but also for protection. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. The lives of sin eaters were not only lonely, but also quite dangerous. Kind of like 007.
Well, did they get like a tape set that said, if you accept this assignment,
no, that's
they'll self-destruct in 5 seconds?
That's a different franchise.
Oh, sorry.
That's Mission Impossible.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. So, lonely, but also quite dangerous. Since the Catholic Church had a monopoly on the absolution of sins, and the members of the clergy were the only people allowed to perform absolution rituals, sin eating was outlawed and punishable by death.
Wow. You talk about a monopoly, huh?
Talk about a rough crowd. Yeah, tough crowd. It's a tough crowd. Yeah. Not only those who conducted the sin eating, but
now can't you just see Rodney Dangerfield being a sin eater?
No, I tell you. No dressing. I gotta eat this raw.
Give me that bowl of beer.
Give me a bowl of beer. Yeah. Oh, but on you it looks great. Yeah.
I'll tell you, I had it so rough, I had to eat the bread that had sins in it. That sounded more like Obama than Rodney Dangerfield. Sorry.
Yeah. Maybe Sandy, can we cut that part out? Okay, so
tried.
No, you did. You very, very okay. Yeah, very. So not only those who conducted the sin eating, but also those who employed sin eaters to rid their dead loved ones of sins were considered heretics, blasphemers, and worshippers of Satan. Therefore, sin eaters were usually forced to keep their business shrouded in a veil of secrecy.
You know what? I don't have my veil of secrecy anymore.
Oh? Well, when you had your veil of secrecy, what would you secretly veil? Or keep veil? What would you veil?
Well, that's a pretty personal question, Charlie. I don't, I'm a married woman. I can't really be discussing this stuff with you.
All right. So, when a member of a very poor family died, the survivors who couldn't afford to pay the fee of a sin eater, in this case, they would sometimes lay a piece of bread on the dead body, say some prayers over it, then carry the bread into the street and give it to a beggar without telling him that it had been on top of a corpse.
Well, that is wrong.
That is wrong on so many levels. It's just absolutely on so many levels, yes.
What's wrong with people? Can't they just tell the truth?
Oh, my God. How much time do you have? You in reference to this.
Here's this piece of bread. Right. It's got a lot of really cool sins in it. Have a bite.
No, come on. No, really. And they start to laugh, and they say, no, really, it's loaded with sins. And a person laughs and just says, I haven't had such a laugh in such a long time. I'm a beggar. I have no food. So, look, dinner and a show. Fine, I'll take the bread. Thank you for making me laugh. Yes, I see it now. So, by using this trick, they could get the sins removed from the body of their loved one for free. And speaking of free food, actually, this isn't free. Our recipe of the week is sin dip.
There's no such thing as a free lunch, Charles. Hey, maybe that's how that saying came about.
What's that?
Was when somebody gave, a piece of bread with the sins in it,
Yeah.
and the person ate it, and they thought, "Oh, good, I had a free lunch." And somebody said, "Oh, there's no such thing as a free lunch."
Ironically or cryptically, and the beggar thought, "Oh, okay," and thought nothing of it. But in reality, yes. Okay,
in reality,
all right. That bears investigation. Yeah. So, yes. So, sin dip, to be eaten with bread, with or without the sins of the dead infused. Yeah, I don't know. Just on a professional level, I would think maybe better without the sins of the dead infused.
Well, it depends on what you're into, man. What if you're one of these people who never sins, and you say, "I just want to see, how the other half lives. Let me take some of these on." And
I see. I see. So you're not from the planet Earth. When you say that, nobody sins. So, do you want to know why it's called sin dip?
Yes.
Me too. So let me read it. It's called sin dip because it's so rich. It's a sin to eat it. Don't let that deter you. We're all sinners, aren't we?
Well, you are.
We all need a hobby. Might as well eat something delicious. So, sin dip is a combination of sour cream, shredded cheddar cheese, cream cheese, chopped ham, chopped green chilies. Marianne, this doesn't specify. Is it mild chilies or jalapenos?
It's whatever floats your boat, Charles.
I see. This is America. So you choose, and choose wisely, chopped green chilies and Worcestershire sauce mixed together and served in a bread bowl. To die for.
Can't wait.
So you can find that recipe at everyonedies.org. That's dies.org. And while you're there, send us your own recipes to share with others. Also, we appreciate your comments and anything else you want to tell us. Keep it clean. You can email us at everyonedies.org. Please join our Facebook group, Everyone Dies, and please remember to rate and review this podcast. Molly, our fabulous Twitter communicator, is hoping you contribute to her job security by following us on Twitter and reposting her tweets. Her fate is in your hands.
Bum, bum, bum.
Bum, bum, bum.
So,
yes.
Welcome to our second half. Charlie, we're going to talk, I'm going to talk about recurrent cancer, and specifically recurrent breast cancer, although really a lot of what I have to say could be applied to any kind of cancer. So, thankfully you haven't been...
So if I may ask then, why breast cancer in particular? Is that like the highest...
Because I'm going to kind of use that when I need to have an example. So that's why I'm saying most of it applies to just about any kind of cancer, except when it doesn't.
So the vessel with the pestle has a brew that is true. Okay, I got it. Very good.
So being diagnosed with cancer is really very scary. Having it return is a fear that's on a totally different level. Now, I worked in oncology for quite a while, and people talk about being cured. People say things like the cancer's gone. Some patients say that they were told that they were cured. But healthcare practitioners really don't use the word cure. What we say is we believe that you're cancer-free instead of saying you're cured. The most common description is no evidence of disease, or NED. Since there's no current cure for cancer, doctors will refer to a medical condition as being in a state of remission, or NED, no evidence of disease. This means that as far as the medical testing shows, there's no active cancer growing in the body. But cancer cells can be microscopic. So they can be hanging around in God knows where, hiding out until at whatever point, and we don't know what makes that happen, they decide that they're going to kind of rear their ugly heads and come back to life.
So this is kind of like dormant, like, I don't know, like hibernating dormant. Is that accurate?
Well, it hides,
Right.
Women, so for example, women with ovarian cancer,
Yeah.
they get their ovaries out, they have chemo, some of them have radiation, and 5, 10, 3 years later, they might have metastatic disease to their brains or their lungs. And when that tumor is looked at under the microscope, the cells are ovarian cancer. And people say, how could it be ovarian cancer? I had all that stuff out 5 years ago. Well, yeah, you had all that stuff out 5 years ago.
Right, yeah.
But those cells went and, hid under a rock somewhere, wherever they went, and they didn't kind of bloom until they decided to bloom. And so science doesn't know, well, what makes something bloom. We have some ideas, which I'm going to talk about with you today. But there are other things. It's like, so why now? Why did this happen? And a lot of times, I'd say all the time, people say, well, why me? Why did this happen? And it's like, it happened because it happened, and nobody likes that answer. Some people want to look at it as, well, am I being punished for something? Nope, the body works in this funny kind of way, and something zigged instead of zagged, and now you have cancer. And people hate that answer, but it is really the truth. The reality is that we never know, any of us, if there are cancer cells in our bodies. And for those who have had a cancer diagnosis, the fear is always that the cancer is going to rear its head again. The Breast Cancer Foundation, the National Breast Cancer Foundation, among having studied people with breast cancer survivors, discovered that the number one topic of interest for these women was the risk of recurrence. You talk to anybody who's had cancer, it's like they feel like there's this knife hanging over their head, or a rock hanging over their head. Like, when's the other shoe going to drop? When is this going to come back? It may never come back, or it may come back, but there is no way to know. So the number one first line of intervention in cancer treatment is to remove the cancer. Surgery is the primary goal. That sometimes can't be the first thing. Sometimes they have to shrink the tumor to get it small enough. But be that as it may, surgery is a major important part of treatment. So during surgery...
I'm sorry, if I can ask, why does it have to be smaller? Why can't they just open up and take the thing out?
Well, it depends on where it is, because let's say you've got a cancer in a very critical place, like right next to your heart, or right next to a major blood vessel, or wrapped around something funky. You can't just, rip somebody open, plow around in there, grab it, and pull it out. They're not always quite so easy to access. So, sometimes tumors are really, really big when they're found, and they, depending on how they're wedged and where they are, they're just too big to get to and safely remove without doing tons more damage. So sometimes what they'll do is what's called neoadjuvant treatment, where they'll do the chemo first, shrink the tumor, and then do the surgery.
So with that much chemo, does that then, affect, whatever's near it? Whatever's near the tumor?
Well, the thing with chemo is it's systemic, so everything gets affected.
Okay.
We don't have. There there are some I don't want to say we don't have any targeted chemos, but we, like for certain kinds of like ovarian cancer, they can put the chemo right into the perineum and kind of wash it in chemotherapy. But generally, you get a port put in, the chemo's going to your entire body, which is why people lose their hair, is because they don't have cancer of the hair. It's just that the chemotherapy has killed those cells and the hair falls out.
Okay. Oh, all right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So during surgery to remove an original diagnosis of breast cancer, so like lumpectomy or mastectomy, the surgeon removes all the cancer that can be seen and felt. But tests for cancer aren't sensitive enough to detect tiny groups of cancer cells that may be left over after surgery. It's possible for isolated groups of cells to survive radiation therapy. They survive chemotherapy, both of which are given to reduce the risk of recurrence. Even a single cell that escapes treatment may be able to multiply and grow into a tumor. So when I talk about recurrence, it means you've had one cancer, you've had treatment, and sometime after that, it recurred or it came back. Okay? Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about breast cancer as a model to how to talk about this, breast cancer can come back in 3 general areas, but the principles are the same for any kind of cancer. So you can have what's called a local recurrence. That's when the breast cancer area where the cancer was originally diagnosed. So we have an interview this week with Denise. And if you listen to that, she had a local recurrence right next to where her original breast cancer was where she recurred. Okay? The second kind of recurrence is called a regional recurrence. And this is when the lymph nodes, in the case of breast cancer, when the lymph nodes in the armpit or the collarbone area near where the cancer was originally diagnosed. So it's in the region, it's in the ballpark of where the original cancer was. And then the third type is what's called metastatic or distant recurrence. This is when another part of the body, such as the lungs, the bones, or the brain, could even be, though rarely, the opposite breast, gets the cancer. And this is called metastatic or distant recurrence. So if you think about, remember when we were kids and, the dandelions would, they would be yellow and then they become those yellow puffs, right?
Right. Yeah.
Or the white puffs,
yeah,
rather.
Yeah.
And if you held it up to your lips and you blew on it, mm-hmm. those seeds would go off. And some of them would only go so far and then drop. And some would maybe go a little bit further and then drop. And some, one maybe even, would just like fly off and do its own thing. Well, cancer cells can be like that. So generally we know where certain types of cancers will generally metastasize to if they're going to. But sometimes you've got that one wild cancer cell that just goes off, does its own thing, and shows up someplace where it's like, well, that's pretty rare. It's not to say it never happens. It's just it's pretty rare for it to go to that part. So there are protocols for cancer surveillance through the National Comprehensive Cancer Network. It's called the NCCN guidelines. And for those of you who've had cancer, you might hear your oncologist talk about how they follow the NCCN guidelines. If you haven't had cancer, that's okay. There's this thing called the NCCN guidelines. And these are a comprehensive set of guidelines that detail the sequential management decisions and interventions for every type of cancer. So, like our cancer center, we would follow the NCCN guidelines. So if we had somebody who was, this tumor type, the tumor was X large, how many centimeters it was, and it was, a breast cancer or renal cancer, whatever, you could go to the NCCN guidelines, go to renal cancer, find the size, find the cell type, and it would tell you, based on all the evidence or all the research that had been done relative to that type of cancer, the standard of care for management, meaning here's the best evidence we have. Now, it's not to say that it's a cure, but it's the best evidence for management. And here's how often a person would need to be screened, and here's the tests that need to be done. And, there's sort of a what's called a surveillance plan. So that's how we decide what treatment and how often to see somebody. And you can look them up and see what's considered to be the standard of care. And we're going to put that website in the links on our webpage. Certain cancers require a CAT scan. In the case of breast cancer, mammograms are going to be required yearly. And people will talk about scanxiety. That's that fear that they feel when their annual scan or their mammogram comes around. Fear of the unknown creates anxiety, and some people will skip those scans out of fear because they're afraid. But that's really the worst thing you can do, because if something has changed and you don't go and have your scans, you're not going to know that it's changed, and it's going to do whatever it decides that it's going to do, and it's going to make things more difficult for you. That fear of recurrence is a major, major fear for anybody who's living with cancer. Symptoms that people have, in my experience in working with people living with cancer, everything that happens in their head, they say to themselves, is this because the cancer is back?
Oh, geez.
It doesn't really matter what it is, but the knee-jerk reaction is, oh my God, is the cancer back?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I would have to do a lot of education with people and say, because I did surveillance with people, I followed people along, and they'd say, I just don't have, 5 years after all their treatment and stuff, I just don't have the energy that I used to. And, is that because of the cancer? Is the cancer back? And we'd have to have a talk like, well, don't forget, you're also 5 years older. And there's changes that happen.
Yeah.
There are changes that are age-related that you have to factor in too. So it's not, even though the kind of logic is for people is to say, well, it's all related to the cancer, but in truth, it's not all related to the cancer. After completing acute treatment, which is usually surgery, chemo, radiation, sometimes not chemo, sometimes not radiation, sometimes not surgery, but generally you say surgery, chemo, radiation. You may feel like you've fallen off a cliff, and you say, this is a life-altering experience. This feeling takes over rather than feeling like you want to celebrate, and you think about all the things that you want to do. But many patients don't want to celebrate. They think they're going to jinx themselves. So to cope with the fear of recurrence, it's important for you to remember to know things, that there are things that you have some control over. We don't have, control is a myth, but there are some things we have control over can reduce the risk of recurrence. See, like I don't have control over Charlie asking me like what.
Yeah, interrupting you in midstream, yeah.
Yeah. So there are some things you can do to reduce the risk of recurrence. So Charlie, you might say like what? Well, excellent question. First,
thanks.
Diet. Maintain a low-fat diet with 30 grams of fat or less per day, which would then translate into any recipe we give you, don't make. Exercise for about 30 minutes every day, at least 5 days a week. Power walking is a good place to start. I've had so many, and we're going to do a show pretty soon about fatigue, because people will say, I'm too tired to do a walk. Well, you don't have to do aerobics or zooaerobics or any of the other fancy schmancy stuff. If you just walk to your mailbox or walk to the corner store, that starts getting your body a little healthier so you can do more and more. Tobacco, no smoking or tobacco use. That includes the, the stuff you put in your cheek. What's that called?
Oh, brother.
Snuff? No, it's not snuff, is it?
No. Oh, come on.
Chew.
Chewing tobacco.
Yeah, don't do that. What you're doing is you're putting the tobacco right in contact with those delicate cheeks of yours. And having seen people with head and neck cancers, the tobacco will erode that. Oh. And some people, instead of spitting out that tobacco juice, will swallow it.
Really?
And yeah. And you know what that does to your, esophagus and tummy? Not good. So stop it.
Okay.
Alcohol.
I'm going to make a note of it. What?
Alcohol. No alcohol.
What you talking about, Willis?
No alcohol. It used to be recommended to limit alcohol, but recent research now says no alcohol. And it doesn't matter what kind of alcohol. Now, you might say to yourself, okay, I have cancer. I really want to decrease my risk of recurrence. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. I'm going to do everything except I'm going to have 1 glass of wine a day. Well, okay. Is that going to be the variable for you? I don't know. All we know is what the science tells us that says people who drink alcohol, even 1 glass a day, have a higher risk of recurrence. And that's true with tobacco. I can't tell you how many patients with lung cancer who say, well, I already got the cancer. Why do I have to quit smoking now? Well, a couple reasons. One, your body does better with the chemotherapy if you're not smoking. And two, you don't need to be continually insulting your body with the tobacco products while you're trying to recover by taking chemotherapy, having radiation, having surgery.
So I could understand during the recovery, but I don't know, during a week, maybe 1 glass of wine or 2 glasses of wine, even then, that's still, and again, I understand what you're saying. It depends on the individual and their body's reaction, but as a, I don't know, way of life, to have a beer on a Saturday night while watching something or another, that's not.
So the data says when they look at, let's say you've got 10 people and you have them fill out a questionnaire. How many of you smoke? How much do you walk? How much do you drink? Blah, blah, blah. All these variables, lifestyle variables. And then they look at, okay, which one of these people recurred? The people who were more likely to recur were the ones who had a high-fat diet, not exercising, smoking, drinking, So all we can do as the healthcare practitioners is advise you of what the science says. We're not going to walk around with you. We're not going to say, you may never have another drink, because who the heck are we? All we can tell you is that it increases the risk of recurrence. And, a lot of this stuff comes back down to quality of life. You say to yourself, well, if I can't, if I can't ever have a martini, then screw it, I don't even want to live. Some people might say that. Okay, so then have the martini. I mean, I'm not being judgy.
Right, no, of course not.
It's a roll of the dice.
Yeah.
All you can do is make your own best decisions. Don't tell me I can't have chocolate anymore. Just don't. I'm telling you, Charlie, just don't.
No chocolate, no soup. No chocolate soup for you. Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Hormone therapy. So in certain kinds of cancers, we use hormone therapy. You have to take your hormonal therapy prescription as prescribed. This can reduce the risk of recurrence by 50%. And what these are, when I'm talking about hormone therapy, in the case of breast cancer, some breast cancers are kind of fueled, if you will, by estrogen. It's like gasoline on the fire, like estrogen, oh, good, I'm going to grow. The cancer really likes it. So what they do is they prescribe what's called an estrogen blocker, which will block that estrogen, absorb it out of the body. And that's not without side effects and discomfort and early menopause and its own, achy joints, changes in mood, changes in increased vaginal dryness, painful intercourse. I mean, there's a lot that goes with it. So, taking it correctly can decrease your risk of recurrence by 50%. But you might say, you know what? I feel so crappy that I just don't care. I'd rather roll the dice and risk recurrence than feel the way that I do. As long as you know that what we know is that decreases risk by 50%, which is pretty big. And we have a couple different hormonal therapies we can try, but if you've tried them all and you still feel like crap, you've got to kind of look at it in light of your quality of life. It's important to stay in touch with current research. Like a lot of people go on Facebook and they say, so what therapy should I have? Well, maybe that's a good way to do it. I don't think so.
Yeah, not a good idea. Yes.
We want to have the best evidence-based research based on the studies. That's how we make our decisions about treatment. Your attitude is important. If you're waiting for your cancer to rear its ugly head again, then you're going to go through life feeling like your cancer is controlling you. You need to surround yourself with positivity, live each day to the fullest, and don't, cancer is something you have, but it doesn't have to have you. Limiting stress. Chronic stress really taxes our immune system. When our immune system isn't working, cancer cells may start to grow. Our body produces cancer cells every day, but we have T cells that go in and that kill them. When we're under a lot of stress, that affects our T cell production. So it's important to know the difference between acute stress and chronic stress. I mean, we can't control the acute stress when, you get a flat tire or something happens, but we can manage our chronic stress. And the last aspect is vitamin D3. So low vitamin D3 has been shown to be a risk factor, and in fact is a risk factor in a lot of different cancers. It's a risk factor in breast cancer. It's showing, new research showing in ovarian cancer. It's been documented in colon cancer. So vitamin D levels need to be 30 or above. And at the cancer center where I worked, the oncologist in breast oncology wanted their patients above 60. The majority of women diagnosed with breast cancers are in the single digits in terms of their vitamin D3 levels. Primary care physicians rarely do a blood test to check for vitamin D3. So I'm telling all you ladies and you guys too, say, I don't think I've ever had my vitamin D3 checked. Would you check it? And they can, and you can supplement, but you got to stay on top of it, because I'll tell you, you stop taking your medicine and stop watching it, it'll drop down really, really quickly. So those are the things that you can do. Like I said, we have a really good interview that'll be out on Wednesday. So probably by the time you're listening to this, it'll already be out, talking to a woman who had recurrent breast cancer. Any questions, Charles?
No, it's a lot to think about. I would just what you had just said about the vitamin D. I don't think about it enough. Like, if I start adding, if I do one thing, or just go for a checkup, and the doctor says, oh, you're a little low in this or a little low in that. I mean, just to take a pill, like a vitamin, and it just, it could make all the difference. So, yeah.
So what I used to tell my patients always is get the prenatal vitamins. Doesn't matter what gender you are, how old you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the, there's no advertisement, but maybe it is for the CVS, like sour gummy multivitamins, but the prenatal vitamins.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the first place, those are tax deductible if you itemize your taxes because they come off as the, what's it called when you have the pre-tax reimbursement account for medicine. Those will show up on your receipt as a allowed expense. And they taste really good. And because they're prenatal, they're chock full of just everything you need. So I take those every day. And then once a week, I take a vitamin D3 supplement. And I get my vitamin D checked every 6 months. And I'm nowhere near 60, as vigilant as I am.
I'm sorry, you take a vitamin pill only once a week? What?
No, I take a vitamin D3 supplement once a week. So there's some that are taken daily, and there are some that are high dose that are taken once a week.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep.
Okay.
So, and all the resources I talked about are on our webpage. So welcome to our third half. And in our third half, we have the pleasure of hearing Charlie read the opening of the third act. Did I call it the third half or the third half? Anyway, the third act of Our Town, a play written by the Pulitzer Prize winner, Thornton Wilder. If you haven't seen or read this play, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. It's about a small town called Grover's Corners in New Hampshire and takes place in 1901. In the first half, we meet the people of the town, and that's what happens.
You know it's Grover's. What? You know it's Grover's Corner.
Didn't I say that? I thought that's what I said.
Grover's.
It's Grover's Corner?
No, you said Grover's.
No, I said Grover's.
No,
you say potato. I say potato. Yeah. No, I did say Grover's. But listen, everybody, it's Grover's Corner, doggone it. In the first
and actually, Our Town won the Pulitzer, or Pulitzer, potato. Thornton Wilder won the Pulitzer for this play, for Our Town.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that we have that clear. So in the first act, we meet the people. In the second act, 3 years have passed, and recent high school graduates, Emily and George, are getting married. In Act 3, it takes place in 1913 in the town cemetery. Emily has just died giving birth to her second child. It is here Charlie, playing the stage manager, enters.
This time, 9 years have gone by, friends. Summer, 1913. Gradual changes in Grover's Corners. Horses are getting rarer. Farmers coming into town in Fords. Everybody locks their house doors now at night. Ain't been any burglars in town yet, but everybody's heard about them. You'd be surprised, though, on the whole, things don't change much around here. Now, this is certainly an important part of Grover's Corners. It's on a hilltop, a windy hilltop, lots of skies, lots of clouds, often lots of sun and moon and stars. You come up here on a fine afternoon, and you can see range on range of hills. I mean, awful blue they are. Up there by Lake Sunapee and Lake Winnipesaukee. And way up, if you got a glass, you can see the White Mountains and Mount Washington, where North Conway and Conway is. And, of course, our favorite mountain, Mount Monadnock. It's right here. And all these towns that lie around it, Jaffrey and East Jaffrey and Petersboro, Dublin. And there, quite a ways down, is Grover's Corners. Yes, beautiful spot up here. Mountain laurel and lilacs. I often wonder why people like to be buried in Woodlawn in Brooklyn when they might pass the same time up here in New Hampshire. Over there are the Stones, 1670, 1680. Strong-minded people that come a long way to be independent. Summer people walk around there laughing at the funny words on the tombstones. It don't do any harm. And genealogists come up from Boston, get paid by city people for looking up their ancestors. They want to make sure they're daughters of the American Revolution. Oh, and of the Mayflower. Well, I guess that don't do any harm either. Whenever you come near the human race, there's always layers of nonsense. Over there are some Civil War veterans. Iron flags on their graves. New Hampshire boys. And a notion that the Union ought to be kept together, though they'd never seen more than 50 miles of it themselves. All they knew was the name, friends. The United States of America. The United States. And they went and died about it. This here is the new part of the cemetery. Hey, here's your friend, Mrs. Gibbs. And let me see. Here's Mr. Stimson, organist and the Congregational Church. And here's Mrs. Soames, who enjoyed the wedding sew. You remember? Oh, and a lot of other. And Editor Webb's boy, Wallace, whose appendix burst while he was on a Boy Scout trip to Crawford Notch. Yeah, an awful lot of sorrow has quieted down up here. People just wild with grief have brought their relatives up to this hill. We all know how it is. And then time and sunny days and rainy days and snow. We're all glad they're in a beautiful place, and we're coming up here ourselves when our fit's over. Now, there are some things we all know, but we don't take them out and look at them very often. We all know that something is eternal, and it ain't houses, and it ain't names, and it ain't earth, and it ain't even the stars. Everybody knows in their bones that something is eternal, and that something has to do with human beings. All the greatest people ever lived have been telling us that for 5,000 years, and yet you'd be surprised how people are always losing hold of it. There's something way down deep that is eternal about every human being. You know it as well as I do, that the dead, well, don't stay interested in us living people for very long. Gradually, they lose hold of the earth and the ambitions they had and the pleasures they had and the things they suffered and the people they loved. They get weaned away from it. That's the way I like to put it, weaned away. And they stay here while the earth part of them burns out. And all that time, they slowly get indifferent to what's going on in Grover's Corners. They're waiting. They're waiting for something. They feel it coming, something important and great. Aren't they waiting for the eternal part of them to come out clear? Some of the things they're going to say maybe will hurt your feelings, but that's the way it is. Mothers and daughters, husbands and wife, enemies and enemy, money and miser, all those terribly important things kind of grow pale around here. And what's left when your memory's gone and your identity? Thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for future episodes of Everyone Dies. Our thanks to our executive producer, retired Major General David, our producer Sandy, John, our technical advisor, Molly, our Twitter correspondent, and our friends, family, and our loyal listeners who are supporting our work at Everyone Dies. This is Charlie Navarrete.
And I'm Marianne Matzo. And we look forward to talking with you again soon. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion, are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.